Good morning everyone, and welcome to the November 2021 board meeting held in public of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or the MHRA as we prefer to call it. My name is Stephen Lightfoot and I'm the chair of the board, and my role today is to lead us through the agenda. So for those of you who've not attended one of our board meetings before, I must start by saying that this is a board meeting held in public and it is not a public meeting. Having said that, of course, we will provide an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions at the end of the meeting. It's also important to explain that our board is responsible for the strategic leadership of the agency, and it does not make regulatory decisions on individual medical products, as that's done very ably by the officials within our agency with the advice of our independent expert committees. I also need to make you aware that we'll be recording the meeting today so that we can publish the video on our website to provide the opportunity for as many people as possible to observe the meeting and see the work that we do. Now, I'm particularly delighted that 69 people have registered to observe our meeting today, and that's actually a record. So we've got 21 people representing patients or patient groups. We've got 25 people from industry, 5 health professionals and government officials, 2 representatives of the media, and 16 members of our own staff. So thank you for joining us, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. We'll also be joined online by colleagues from the Department of Health, and in particular I'd like to welcome Catherine Glover, who's our Deputy Director for Medicines Regulation and Prescribing at the Department. Now, with introductions in mind, I'd like to go around the table and ask everyone to introduce themselves, just so that the audience can see who we all are. So if I can go around the table and ask everyone just to mention their name and their job title, that would be great. So, June, we'll start with you.
Good morning, I'm June Rain and I'm the CEO at the MHRA.
I'm Natalie Richards, I'm the head of the Executive Office at the MHRA.
Good morning, I'm Mark Bailey, I'm the Chief Science and Innovation Officer.
Good morning, I'm Rash Long, I'm a non-executive in the board of the agency.
Good morning, I'm Junaid Badger, non-exec.
Good morning, I'm Alison Cave, Chief Safety Officer at MHRA.
Good morning, I'm Michael Whitehouse, non-executive and chair of the Audit Committee.
Good morning, I'm Graham Cook, I'm non-executive director.
Good morning, Paul Goldsmith, non-executive.
Good morning, Kirsty Jersey, I'm non-executive director.
Good morning, John Fundry, Chief Operating Officer.
Morning, Ada Hussain, Associate Non-Exec.
Good morning, Claire Harrison, Chief Technology Officer.
Good morning, Mandy Calvert, Non-Exec Director.
Good morning, my name is Laura Squire, I'm the new Chief Officer for Healthcare Quality and Access.
Good morning, I'm Colin Gurry, Director of Governance at the MHRA.
Okay, thank you everyone, and I suppose I should also give a very special warm welcome to Claire and to Laura as their first formal meeting of the MHRA board held in public. It's great to have you on board in your new roles as Chief Technology Officer and Chief Quality and Access Officers, and we really look forward to working with you, so welcome on board to the team. You should all have access to the board pack for today's meeting with all the papers, and I'll use the page numbers in that board pack to keep us all on track. I'll also assume that everyone has read the papers so that we can spend most of our time today on discussion rather than on presentation. We've got some pre-submitted questions from members of the public, and we'll answer those at the end of the meeting. But also during the meeting, if members of the public want to raise any additional questions, then they can do that through the chat function on Zoom. And our Director of Communications, Rachel Bosworth, will actually collect these questions, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we possibly can in the Q&A session at the end. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introductions. Can I just check if there's anything else that I need to make everyone aware of? No? Okay, that's great. That being the case then, if we can move on to the second item on the agenda, which is apologies. And we have apologies from Greg Chalmers and also Alison Strath from the Scottish Government, also from Cathy Harrison, the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer of Northern Ireland. So sadly they can't be with us today, but obviously they have the benefit of being able to watch this recording after the event if necessary. The next item is one of declarations of interest. Can I just check if there are any new declarations from any member of the board that has not already been highlighted? Okay. There's a couple of one point I just did want to make was just around, we have a paper on the ILAP, the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway, on the agenda today. And I just wanted to remind the board that Mandy Calvert consults for a company who has made an ILAP application. And I know that Paul Goldsmith, his company, is also considering making an ILAP application. Yeah, so I want to make the board and just remind them of that. Having reviewed it, I don't consider that it is a conflict, because actually today we're looking at the strategic direction of this procedure, and so we're not making any decisions on it, and so therefore I don't believe that it presents a conflict of interest. So I'm not going to ask Mandy or Paul to leave the room during that discussion. And in fact, actually their presence, from a sort of a knowledge of how the system is working, I think would actually be genuinely a benefit. So that's a conscious decision. But apart from that, I'm not aware of any other new declarations or conflicts that we need to consider. Okay. So that takes us on to the item number 3 on the agenda, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting. So that's on page 2 of the pack. Can I just check first of all, are they a true and accurate record of the meeting that we had in October? I'm not seeing anyone objecting. So on that basis then, can I suggest, Natalie, that we record those minutes as approved? That then leads us on very nicely to the actions from the last meeting, which we'll find on page 9 of the board pack. And I'll just go through the actions highlighted in red, which are the ones that are due today. So item number 34, June, this was around just publishing the information about the new regulatory pathway for genomic medicines. Can you just give us an update on that, please?
Yes, colleagues will recall that this new pathway is effectively fulfilled by the ILAP that we've actually just mentioned, the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway, and the expert leads in the area who are presenting today wish to have the discussion before they make the update, which will happen as soon as that discussion takes place, assuming it's positive, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, and do we know when that conversation will be likely to be had, just from a timescale point of view?
The conversation this morning will lead to the update, and I think that's so important that the broader context and the question as to whether ILAP fulfills that commitment is something the board will reflect on. Okay. And so I think on that basis, if we can just keep the action open, Natalie, until the January meeting, and then we'll hopefully have that closed off at that particular point. Item number 46 on the actions is around ILAP, and that's why the paper's been presented today. So Mark will hear from you later in the agenda. Item number 50 is around the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee's review of financial performance. Michael, that's on the agenda too, so we'll come to that later in the agenda. Item 51 is around the balanced scorecard. So again, John, that's on the agenda, so we'll come to that in due course. And then the final action that was due today was item number 63, which was just sending some written responses to the observers whose questions were not answered during the October board meeting. June, can I again just come back to you and just ask if those written responses were in fact delivered? Happy to confirm that they have been.
That's great. So, Natalie, we can close that action. Thank you very much. So they're the formal actions. Were there any other matters arising from the last meeting that have not already been either mentioned in the minutes or covered in those actions? No? That's great. Okay, that being the case then, can I suggest that we move straight on to the first substantive item, which is one of the current issues from the Chief Executive's point of view. That's on page number 12 of the board pack. June, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. This report, up to the present moment, November, brings together the current issues for the board to consider and to discuss, where relevant, the priorities, and I think it clearly shows the tremendous breadth of activities that the agency undertakes. So in highlighting just one or two of the main messages, I'd like to emphasise some of the tremendous scientific achievements by the teams here at NIBS, as we're all here today. Our focus on healthcare access remains a key deliverable for the agency, and at NIBS, although we often focus here on the batch testing of all the COVID-19 vaccines, that is not the only task that's undertaken, as we're going to hear throughout the day. Although I will stress that by the end of October, 157 batches have been certified, and that's over 150 million doses, so quite some incredible achievement. But of course, there are a number of other areas relating to the pandemic, and one of them is the support for the NHS test and trace. NIBS has produced the LAMP validation panels, which play a vital role in this point of care testing, another tremendously important contribution. But it's not the only virus that's looked at here at NIBS. To worldwide acclaim, the new type 2 polio vaccine developed at NIBS with funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been endorsed by WHO's SAGE Committee for transition to wide use. And I believe it's 7 countries who've used it and 100 million doses so far. And that's a tremendous achievement. And I would also like to note how the WHO Expert Committee for Biological Standardisation, where NIBS presented new and replacement standards, endorsed 9 of these. Again, all a big step forward where those products are needed. So I think finally, congratulations to NIBS on being endorsed and reconfirmed as the WHO Collaborating Centre and the International Laboratory for Biological Standards for another 4 years. Really, congratulations to everyone here, and I know that's something we'll reflect on throughout today. I wouldn't like to finish though without mentioning our work on safety. It's always our top priority with all our activities, and the proactive monitoring of the COVID vaccines has been critical, I think, even to yesterday's announcement that the government's in a position to extend the booster doses to people aged 40 to 49, confident in the safety profile, and importantly to offer the 16 and 17-year-olds their second dose. Again, thanks to tremendous work that's done on the safety monitoring. I'd like to highlight the work in relation to the Cumberledge Review, a constant theme for our board. It's continuing and working with DHSC. We're now consulting on making a major change in the law which will enable everyone to have the safety information with every prescription for sodium valproate. And we might also like to reflect again in the area of women's health about the long-standing work on the safety of breast implants. We met with the Polyimplant Prostheses Action Group, and at the beginning of this month published new pages on the web on breast implant-associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma. Very rare condition, but nonetheless one that we keep under constant review. Finally, I'd just like to stress again, it's the work of all our staff that enable this breadth of work to be continually delivered. Intensive work here at NIBS on the science, but right across the agency, business as usual continuing. Patient safety, of course, is always front of mind, and our dynamic organisation continues to deliver, even though, as we'll hear later today, our transformation programme has reached a major milestone with the completion of staff consultation. So in covering all of this, it feels a tremendous privilege to be able to pay this tribute to everyone involved in delivering. Chair.
Okay, well, thank you, June. I think that's an excellent summary of such a wide range of activities that the MHRA is involved in. I know you will say this is a team effort, but I also try to pay tribute for your continuing work, June, as far as actually working with JCVI and Department of Health officials in terms of everything that's going on with the COVID communications campaigns. So as of yesterday, again, appearing on the press briefing. So thank you for your personal contribution to that, but I know also there's a lot of people behind that make that possible. So thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, so June's given us an overview of all the different activities that are happening. So do we have any particular questions or comments that anyone would like to raise? Junaid?
So maybe just a comment, if I may, and I think last time I referenced the Perform and Transform that the agency was under, but it was amazing, June, to see all the work that the agency continues to do, and some of it's world-class. So being world first in approving the oral antiretroviral, I think that was outstanding, and also the global collaborations that I've also read about both on social media and in addition to what you presented here. So I was just delighted to see the collaborations with the FDA and with NICE and with Health Canada, thinking about not just the work that we're doing on the medicine side, but also that future-facing work that we're doing around AI and other things. I just really want to congratulate you and the entire team on that. So thank you for ensuring that the work that we continue to do is world-class.
Well, thanks, Joe. If I might briefly say, things like delivering molnupiravir, the first oral antiviral, is thanks to the tremendously hard work in healthcare quality and access that is not to be, if you like, undervalued. It's a key aspect of what the teams do, rigorous science, but commensurate with approvals in the shortest time, knowing how important it is for adults with a risk factor that there is this therapy available if they don't mount an immune response to the vaccine. So a really important step as part of the government's initiative to offer therapeutics, not just vaccines and diagnostics. Globally, yes, the FDA was extremely excited to work with the medical device team on the software issues around AI as a medical device. So that again was the first time that we collaborated on an international groundbreaking piece of work. And I think it tells you that some of the work done in the agency that might be seen as a one-off most certainly isn't. It's developing regulation for the future that will enable access for the healthcare system that is such an important step in delivering healthcare.
Yeah, I think that just demonstrates the importance of the international partnerships. That's a key part of our delivery plan, so which is great. Okay, Hayden, how about you?
Thank you, Chair. Just echoing some of what Janet said, I'd like to just understand where the collaboration with the FDA will go. Guiding principles are fantastic, and I'm really glad to see them being published around machine learning. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on continuing collaboration with the FDA and others, potentially our European partners as well, essentially building certifications, schemes and standards.
Certainly the work with the FDA that delivered that first guideline on AI and machine learning is seen just as opening the door. The team has secured funding through the Regulatory Pioneers Fund to enable much more, if you like, practical work to follow on. Again, we're all excited to move this forward, and it seemed, as you say, Heather, that guiding principles are just a first step. But when we're bringing together two regulatory systems, it's very important that we find the level of ambition that enables us to work together effectively. I have spoken and remarked on this need to work in this partnership further with the acting commissioner of the FDA, so I can assure the board that the FDA has the same vision as we have to back up principles with practical work. So perhaps at a future update, Chair, I can invite more on this, or even at a seminar the team involved would like to share some of the thinking behind this. I guess the important aspect is always what healthcare systems need in the way of a regulatory framework so that these products can be safely adopted for patient care.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I think that also works quite well, actually. I think having a sort of future discussion on that would be very helpful, Jim. And I think also the final member of the board that hasn't yet started is going to be Dr. Glenn Wells, who will be our Chief Partnership Officer. Looking at both international partnerships but also UK partnerships, and that will then make the all the leadership changes within the agency that we've started. We'll complete them, and so I think if we allow Glenn to start at the end of this month, and then give him a couple of months to get the feet under the table, then I think we should maybe think of bringing something back to the board. Jim.
Excellent, thank you.
So okay, Michael.
Yes, Chair. Building on the previous question. Does this mean that we are getting closer to regulatory alignment on a global scale, or is there still quite a long way to go?
It's a tremendously important question, and it's one that regulators check in on very regularly. That's why when we moved away from the European network, we put such an importance to become fully fledged members of the International Conference on Harmonisation and the IDMRF. And those are currently at the status of observers, but will move forward as time goes by. So that is our goal. I think from the discussion we've just had, we're going to be targeted in the way we pick areas for international collaborative working. We already have a very mature work-sharing arrangement with the access countries, Australia, Canada, Switzerland and Singapore, and that in itself enables us to explore where common harmonised approaches are most important. And that's why we propose the variance guideline for COVID vaccines through that network. So in a nutshell, I think we will be selective, but always looking to prioritise the areas that have most deliverable for us and are most likely to attract the industry so that the UK becomes a preferred territory. the over the piece type of harmonisation will probably always be an ICH type of initiative. We'll look to pioneer the focused efforts.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Okay, that's great. Mercy.
Yes, it's on 24, the safety of breast implants. I noticed you're going to do research on patient and public perception of risk. And it was really about, have we done this in other areas, or are there plans to do that? Because obviously public perception of patient and public perception of risk is quite an important area. So I was just really interested that you're going to do research in this particular area on breast implants, but other areas, or can we use the learning from this area for other areas as well?
Well, thank you very much. I think this will be an important step in the area of medical devices, and particularly as the use in this sector of healthy people, what is the level of risk that is acceptable, and how to support healthy people who are making these decisions with the evidence and information they need. We've looked at research in the past and discovered quite surprising differences between the levels of risk that patients are prepared to accept at different stages in their health journey, compared with what perhaps a medical profession might consider is acceptable risk. And there are some quite good and well publicised examples of that. We've touched on it in the past, for example, with multiple sclerosis and an innovative medicine in that area that had some quite serious complications. So it's not a first, but I think in its sector, particularly for healthy people, and given the very rare risk of ALCL, it will be an important learning that we will adapt to other areas. So let's return to that again, possibly in your committee, Mercy.
Thank you, June.
And just building on that point, June, is there again international collaboration on the safety of breast implants, in particular, that's worth mentioning?
We have certainly collaborated with the FDA in this area, and one of the first steps I took in this role was to go to an international meeting called MedEpinet that brought together a number of regulators. Interestingly, the sense of the risks around some of these medical devices was very common, but the regulatory tools to approach the issue were different. And I think it's a good point to revisit some of this as we look to the consultation on medical device legislation for the UK. So in a sense, it was endorsing that the clinical and patient experience was very much in common between us, for example, Australia, Canada, US, but the tools to approach managing those risks could be optimised. And I think once we've got the response to the medical device legislation, we will be able to look at this a bit further.
Yeah. Okay, and Mercy, we can maybe look to your committee, patient safety engagement, for some sort of assurance. But again, I think the work needs to be completed first, but that will be helpful. Mandy, can I come to you, please?
Okay, thanks, Stephen. It's building on some of the points, particularly around the good machine learning practice, but also good practice with the GXPs that we have that are changing in terms of clinical trials, machine learning, and how we educate and get that message out so they're used by industry and proponents. And are we doing enough both in our collaborations but also internally to get that education and communication message? Because in many ways, industry and people doing software and everything else are going to be coming to us and say they've followed these guidelines, but do they really understand the implications of that? And it's taken a long time to get GMP established. Are we underestimating how it's going to get embedded in practice in the real world?
So it's the follow through from the guidelines.
It certainly is, and it's an area that, I have to be very honest, has probably been deprioritised during COVID, post-EU exit, and with all the focus on cumberage. And I think it's time, as we look to the new normal, to revisit our educational and skilling initiatives. We've traditionally partnered with, for example, the DIA, but there are other providers of education to ensure maximal outreach. But I know it's something that once the transformed organisation gets underway, our leads in the comms area will be very focused on. As I say, it's a matter of slight regret that we've needed to deprioritise during the last 18 months. But I think as we come out of that, we'll revisit. It can be, in fact, a useful income stream for the agency, but the more important benefit is that industry is skilled and conversant with the requirements. No one wants guesswork, we want it right first time.
Yeah, maybe we can use the example of, we're doing a public consultation on the device regulations, there's point of care manufacturing consultation going on at the moment, and 2 or 3 others. And maybe actually just from an assurance point of view, to come back to sort of say, okay, once the guidelines have been issued, then what the follow through beyond that might be a very sensible thing to do. Because there's no point in having regulations that are just published and then they're left fallow without that follow through. So I think with the public consultations we're currently doing, we can maybe, sort of 6 months after that, then look for an assurance, what's the follow through been? Something along those lines?
Exactly, and if the board is giving this more priority, we will, at the executive, look again at some of the areas that have been deprioritised. It's in no one's interests to be looking for compliance where, but for the sake of some really effective education initiatives, we could have got it right first time.
Well, particularly when the regulatory environment in devices is going to change so substantially. So it seems that we've got to make extra effort, I would have thought, to ensure that industry can actually adapt, and then also, obviously then comply. So there's an adaptation and transition phase that's required first. So we need to help with that, I think.
And there's a very positive familiarity now with the use of webinars, hands-on teaching. You can get into a breakout and have tuition. The ease of using the virtual environment really should facilitate a much stronger educational push.
And pre-COVID, we were doing a lot of webinar work, a lot of seminars that were face-to-face at that time, weren't they? But the technology enabled us to do, reach a lot more people more quickly, and even then have it on record and just repeat it, so it's self-service. So. Okay, Paul.
In terms of public interest in AI, the recent lectures this year are on AI.
Yeah, that's interesting. Graham, over to you.
Firstly, just to echo the congratulations for the range of things that's on the report this time. Could I just pick up on one about clinical trials legislation? So you talked about some discussion and a plan for a consultation. How soon do you think it might be possible for guidance to change? I think there's a distinction there between guidance and regulation and things that might be done quickly. So what would be your ambition for that, and when do you think the consultation might conclude?
I think colleagues will have appreciated that in terms of engagement on the future legislative framework, we could go further, and for that reason we've had 5 meetings of a short life task and finish group which really focused on patients' perspectives and the research community to make sure there was, if you like, much better alignment. And it does go to the timeframes you're asking about, because in theory, if we really hone those proposals, we can make much speedier progress. As of this week, I have a draft proposal which goes through the hoops before a formal public consultation, our aim being to start that before the end of November, and then to get the legislation on the statute in the first quarter of next year. Of course, your question is more about the underpinning guidance, and again, the ambition is, if we've aligned our thinking, we will then move much more smoothly to introducing new guidance where it's needed. The aim has been threefold, really. Simplification, to streamline, paving the way to a rapid uptake of a recruitment and institution of a trial, and removing obstacles, of which there have been in the past, particularly for the research community, and thirdly, the international interface that we're working on with the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities. So it's a long answer, but it is the upfront work to speed consultation. Hopefully it's a consultation that we will find a very smooth progress for, and then to move to guidelines, again with that constituency that includes regulator, industry, researchers, patients, and the other organisations that we've surfaced who all need to be brought on board. And there are more than you might imagine before a trial can start. If there's RSAC legislation or whatever other bits of legislation affect what happens to volunteers or patients. So we're looking to an end-to-end process, and having ironed out some of the areas of quite considerable discussion. I'll give you one, whether we should have a requirement for studies in pregnant women, for example, and there's an ethical aspect there too. But the upfront airing of those should make for a much smoother introduction, and the point, Chair, I'll take away is you're highlighting the guidance that underpins it. We don't want any unintended consequences of what we see as a simplification or an easement to turn into another burden.
Just building on that, June, obviously we talked about partnerships earlier. Obviously there's another key partnership for clinical trials, which is with the Health Research Authority, and we've done a lot of work with the IT system, with combined ways of working. You know, in terms of this regulatory approach, are you looking to combine other stakeholders in the UK health system as part of this consultation?
I think there's no reason why not, and I think if you could bring the funder, the ethical approval and the regulatory approval to one simplified process, and also one, if you like, set of proposals that meet needs, then we will have helped things get going. We hear that one of the major issues is actually the start-up, even if the regulatory steps are as smooth and as streamlined as possible. So there's more to do, but I think what we've found in having a very small and tightly focused group, we get alignment of thinking much more quickly. So yes, the IT kit that makes sure that the MHRA and our own regulatory approval is smooth, that should be the basis for a much broader integrated pathway.
And then I think there's also then the information flow to NICE, in terms of actually these clinical trials are being done, so we'll need to think about starting to plan health technology assessments, or rather they will. So this is starting to integrate the UK health ecosystem, to be honest, which I think is actually much more than just a simple clinical trial regulation piece of guidelines, Graham. I think if we're really ambitious, we'll try and link a number of these things together. That will be my ambition for definite. So, okay, thank you for that. Any further thoughts on June's report? No? Well, June, again, can I just sort of say thank you again to you and your entire team for all the work that he's going on doing such a fantastic job, to be honest. So we really appreciate that.
We'll pass that on to the staff concerned, because it's everyone, takes everyone.
Yeah. And I think the key points of the discussion today around a lot of work, talk on partnership working. You know, we talked about the FDA partnership on machine learning. Yeah, and I think it would be useful to bring some of that partnership, our ambitions internationally, back to a future board when a new chief partnership officer starts. You talked about targeting the work there, so I think actually understanding the priorities will be important as part of that, June. We talked about breast implants, and I think actually sort of looking at the regulatory framework there, and actually engagement, and then assurance from Mercy's committee. And then I think actually a really important point on the follow-through on guidelines and education to help to really cement regulatory changes to allow everyone involved in the ecosystem to adapt, and so that we can then regulate efficiently and effectively for the benefit of patients. So there were the key points that I pulled out from that. And then clinical trials consultation, which is obviously a piece of ongoing work anyway. It's in our delivery plan. So. Great. Okay, well, thank you for that, June. As we're talking about performance, it seems only appropriate that we move on to the next item, item number 5, which is on page 20 of the board pack, which is what is the performance of the MHRA on a balanced scorecard. So, John Fundry, you can assume that we've read the report with great interest. Are there any key highlights you want to make? And then we will go to questions, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick few comments from me. So, yes, this covers Q2, so our first 6 months to September. As it's a quarter, we have the full suite of metrics. As you know, in the interim months, we have a less extensive set of metrics. As planned this month, we're making a number of changes and additions, and those are summarised in section 3 of the paper. Probably just one to highlight. So new for this iteration of the balanced scorecard is the productivity measure. At the moment, that's a pretty broad brush measure. It's crudely, the number of outputs divided by the staff resource associated with it. We'd hope to refine that in the future. We're considering implementing timesheets for selected areas, and that would enable us to get a lot more granular. Final comment, as highlighted in the paper, we have been working on targets. I think that's got scope for further development. As part of the transformation programme, we're undertaking service reviews for each of the key business or delivery areas, and I think that work will inform what the respective targets should be. So I think those will develop over the next 3 to 4 months. So that's all I choose to highlight at this point, Chair, and open it up to discussion and questions.
Well, I think as we agreed several months ago at the beginning of the year, we actually said that this would be an iteration and it would continue to evolve. So I'm pleased to see that it's continuing to evolve. I'd encourage us to keep thinking about what are the outcomes rather than the inputs, and I think actually that's how it can certainly be developed further. As we go into questions, can I just remind board members just to speak up? I think there's a few sound issues, so if you could just ask everyone just to speak and project clearly, that would be very helpful. Okay, colleagues, any questions? Oh.
In terms of the PPI metric, what percentage of the population have heard of MHRA? And do we have a demographic breakdown in that group?
So we're currently undertaking a procurement for a kind of reputation index, if you like, and I think we'll use the supplier to help flesh that out. I mean, there's no doubt that public awareness has significantly increased because of COVID. Some time ago, actually, we were having discussions with Ofqual, who regulate the vocational qualifications market. They've been tracking their reputation and awareness for, I think, 5 or 6 years now, so they have a lot of trend data, and actually they find it quite informative. So we're hoping to replicate something like that, because you get a combination of awareness plus actually reputation in terms of effective delivery. So if we can get to that, the other side of procurement, then I think we'll see the data.
Yeah. What's your experience of this area, Paul?
Well, perhaps it's a reflection. I don't live too much in a bubble, because lots of people I interact with, when I say I'm on the board of MHRA, they say, what's that? And when you talk about the vaccine legislation, okay, I get an idea what you're doing, but I suspect lots of people don't know about it.
Yeah, I think there's two components just from my own marketing background in terms of awareness first, but then actually trust second, and so that's why the reputation index is so important. This is a fairly new area for the agency, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, John? So which is why we're looking to bring in some external help to help us to identify and to analyse this. But I think actually once we've got some data we can rely on, I think it'd be useful to have a board discussion around reputation and branding and communication, because this is so vitally important. Because if the public do not know who we are, we can't expect them to trust us as a starting point. And then, so there's definitely two components to this. I think that's very helpful. Junaid.
John, thank you. I was wondering if I could do a double click into the EDI metrics, so the equality, diversion and inclusion metrics that were included this time around. And what does grade 7 mean? And are we doing enough around the EDI agenda, or should we be doing more? I know there was a couple of commentary made saying comparison to civil service, and we recognise the importance of doing something, but what actually are we doing?
Thanks, Junaid. So grade 7 is probably the second most senior of what we call the delegated grades, so effectively probably translates as middle management, if that's a fair description. So actually it's quite a populous cadre. So at that level they would be managing teams, directing operationals, so a fairly critical area, if you like. Along with Mandy's committee, we've been sharing the results of the work we've been doing. I mean, if you look at our base stats in this area, we're probably more diverse than the civil service as a whole, if we regard that as our benchmark. If you measure us against the population, we've still got a fair amount to do. So we've set out in that strategy a number of areas, and actually some of the actions are for the board to undertake in terms of walking the talk and the leadership. So I think we're due to come back to Mandy's committee with another update next year.
Can I? Actually, man, you want to go?
Yes, I think, and we did look at the impact. I think the impact here from the survey of staff and understanding the role of leadership and how that works. And I think one of the agenda items we wanted to put forward was a deeper dive into EDI, but also that feedback that we'd had from leaders and staff, particularly during this time of transformation. We might cover that again a bit later. So I think there is more. I think there's more we need to understand about what's the underlying issues that are causing these results, and to work a bit more. So that's something we do want to look at.
You see, I'd probably be more assertive than that, Mandy, if I'm honest, because I think looking at the culture survey results, if 1/3 of our staff say that the leaders in the organisation, 13% are not, it's only 13% are walking the talk, I think that's poor. I think that's really, really poor, and we need to actually address that. Similarly, you know, I think if 1/3 of our staff, and then 1/3 of them are then saying that we do not, sorry, there's only 1/3 say we make timely decisions, so therefore 2/3 are saying we don't make timely decisions, I think that is poor. And I don't think we should sugarcoat that, and I think we need to see some specific actions to address that. And I think that's obviously due through your executive committee, you'll be part of that. But I think the board in its entirety has a responsibility for this as well. And so I don't want this to be given in any way pushed into the long grass and we'll have a review in whenever. I think we need to think of a more assertive action plan more quickly. So when was your next meeting of the committee, Mandy?
We've got a meeting in December.
December?
Yeah. And then we'll be quarterly after that.
Okay. And June, your team will feed into that?
Absolutely, and we've been linking in with what DHSC are doing in this space, which I have to say is excellent. So we've got various prompts now, and this discussion will give us more impetus to get this thoroughly looked at.
I don't think there'll be a magic bullet to this. You know, there's not going to be a simple solution. It's going to take time to rebuild trust and also to provide that clarity of leadership. And obviously we're in the middle of the transformation, which is not helping that. So I think we need to accept that that's the case. But I think that we need to take responsibility for addressing these numbers. And I think this is a signal for this board to say this is a metric that we, not the executive, but we need to increase. Mercy?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment as well about our work with other ALBs and kind of benchmarking against them. So obviously NHS England, NICE, others as well in this space. So it's not just us looking internally or just looking across to the civil service, but other people as well. And actually, I think that helps with our accountability, but it also gives us ideas about kind of areas that we can actually learn from others and move much faster in this direction. Okay.
I think, Mandy, when you're looking at this topic at your Organisational Development and Remuneration Committee, I think what I'd be looking for is assurance that there are going to be some specific actions that are going to address this, not just a quantification of what the current issue is. You know, and this will be over a period of time, I think. But I think I'd be looking for, what are some specific actions that we're going to take to start to address this.
No, I think that's absolutely right, and we started to discuss some of that, and I think the transformation is absolutely essential to work through and give us a foundation to work on. But yeah, I think
thank you.
The message is clear.
Okay, great. Michael,
yeah,
and speak up as well, please.
Sorry, I know I've got a very quiet voice. I'll try to be quiet. I really support John, the work that you're doing on productivity, and it's not an assurance question, it's just an observation about the complexity in this. And I think it is really, really important because we haven't got, as far as I know, any external benchmarks to set productivity levels. So I think those service reviews you're doing are really, really important. And for me, I'd be looking to be clear about what is the definition or what is the, have we got absolute clarity around the outcome that we're looking for, and that we relate our assumptions around productivity to that. Because, the obvious thing is productivity goes up but we don't achieve what we're looking for. So I think this is really complex, really supportive. And I don't know which committee it should go to, Stephen, but I think it needs a bit more.
This is maybe one that maybe needs an example where actually the non-executives can provide input to help to define this. Because it also strikes me that one of the aspects of productivity is actually how we compare with other regulators. You know, and I know we haven't necessarily got access to all of that data, but you know, we've got networks. You know, it would be useful to start to make some sort of comparisons, because we might be as efficient, we might think we're really efficient, but actually if we're still sort of taking 6 months or 12 months longer than other regulators, you know, that are actually more complex than us, that's not good. Similarly, it might prove it the other way. We might prove that we're fantastically productive. But I think because we don't know, I think that becomes an issue. So again, I don't know where that would best sit, really, to be honest, because at one level it's not really audit and risk assurance. It maybe is, again, organisational development in terms of how we compare in terms of performance terms, Mandy?
Yes, I think there might be a little bit of a combination in terms of the organisation. I think we need to understand the services we're offering and the effectiveness of those, and then we can understand how efficient we are. But I think we haven't got that foundation at the moment, and maybe there are some other hints through here, you know, like with the generics. It's like the question I had, but does that mean we're taking longer to approve generics? Because that doesn't seem good productivity. Or is the environment with new active substances saying people aren't coming to here and they're going to other countries first? So I think coming back to really understanding some of those basic things, and then we can try to establish how effective we are in the time to get to issue licenses or get clinical trials running. So I think some of the productivity elements are.
I think there's an element of just phasing of timing of what we do and when, because I think there's obviously a lot of work going on with service design at the moment within the executive, so I think we have to allow that to play out. But I think when the services are being redesigned, particularly in your area, Laura, I would suggest that actually have a mind on how do we measure that you know, during the design phase, and then I think we can maybe come back and then have a discussion on benchmarking, on productivity in its broader sense, and back to the outcomes. What are we delivering as an agency? But I think you'll need to complete the service design work before we can really do too much more on that, I think. It's interesting you mentioned on the generics, because you know, again, we've been having June and I have had discussions with the British Generic Manufacturers Association around the timescales, and a very productive discussion, I think it's fair to say. But you know, I think we should just recognise there's been a real improvement here, because if you start to dig into the data, 31% of our generic applications this year have been determined in less than 12 months. Last year it was 24%, and the year before it was 21%. So you know, we're definitely seeing a definite improvement in getting some of the generic products to market more quickly. So the average is about the same, so there's obviously some at the other end that we also need to address. But I think actually if we think really carefully about generics, you know, every day of delay is probably costing the NHS millions of pounds. And so therefore, actually, our real measure, it shouldn't be in months, it should be in days. Because actually that could be several £million that the NHS is spending that it doesn't need to, because it's taking us too long to actually get generic applications approved. And so in that sense, I think that's starting to join the health system up. You know, and I think we should look to be ambitious. So can we halve the timescales, not just take a couple of days off, but can we halve the timescales? And we probably need a different regulatory approach. That'll have to be thought through. But I think that's just an example where we can use this data to say, okay, what difference can we really make to patients and the public purse in total? So I think that'll be a good example. Graham, I know you wanted to come in.
Well, I mean, certainly to echo that, and I think it clearly has been progress, but shortening or raising the percentage, even approved in 12 months for generics would be great. Now, the question I was going to have was separate, really, which was backed on, you know, clearly there are lots of areas of progress that we can see. I think given that we're at NIBS, I was kind of looking at this, trying to get a sense of NIBS. And really I only saw one metric that seems to speak to that. It may be useful if there are others that you think that I saw the standard sale volume was the metric that seems to capture NIBs. I wondered whether that was a metric that might evolve, whether that was the most meaningful way of measuring what NIBs does, and whether there are other things that are captured here that give us a sense of that.
So I might bring Mark in on this conversation, Graham. But so I think we might be slightly guilty there of measuring actually what's quite easy to measure because that's product shipped out of the door. You know, in terms of relevance to our core purpose, you know, batch testing might be an area that we want to focus on because actually one of the successes of NIBs I think at the moment is how they're coping with the COVID demand and flu, etc. You know, it's interesting to think that when we were doing the contingency planning at the start of COVID, we originally thought that we'd be, putting porta cabins right the way across the car park in order to deliver it. Whereas in actual fact, the team have had to move around a bit, but they're delivering it. So yes, I think that's a valid challenge. We probably are underrepresenting NIBs in this fashion. Yeah. But perhaps Mark might.
I'm very happy to come in. Yes, it's a very good point. NIBs is very much underrepresented here. You'll be hearing later on today, as a separate visit, about the three main areas of NIBs, which is the control testing that John's talked about, the production of reference materials, and the research that we do to support it. Unfortunately, Balanced Scorecard underrepresents those at the moment, and it's something I'm very keen to change. Particularly in the research, you can't see the breadth of the research and the impact at the moment in this. The reference materials, that is an easy one to present, but it doesn't tell you what types of reference materials, how they're being used. And again, the control testing, we can measure it very easily in terms of batches of medicines passing quality and so safe to use, but again, you don't understand the scope of that work. So I've raised this in the Balanced Scorecard. We need to broaden it out. We're getting depth in that in the service definition that John's mentioned as well, and I'm very much keen to update this Balanced Scorecard going forward.
Yeah, you see, I think that's right, and I don't think we should just be thinking about it in NIBs. I think it's the whole scientific agenda.
Yes.
Because actually, a few months ago, we had the paper that was looking at those science research priorities that will have the biggest impact on public health. So it's about impact of science, because it's not just science for science's sake. So yes, we can publish lots of lovely papers, but we're doing some groundbreaking research, and therefore that has a massive public health impact, not just in this country, but internationally. And it's how we can find something to represent that. Otherwise, we end up with a paper, a comment in June's report about we've done a great piece of work on polio, or this, or that. It feels quite disjointed, whereas actually there's a much more coordinated scientific programme of work here that is going to have a massive impact on public health, and we need a way of trying to summarise and capture that, as opposed to just numbers of trials. Graham, what about in your organisation, in your academic, in your day job?
Yeah, I'm not sure
how do you measure scientific impact?
I'm not sure, well, I can go into detail, but I don't want to bore you too much. But I think I do worry about metrics that are based on volume, and I mean, it's about quality and impact.
It is.
I think it's difficult to think what that quality measure would be for the research that goes on here, but I think capturing quality in some way is crucial. And impact obviously is a longer term thing, and less often, you don't often have a new vaccine that you can trumpet, but being able to capture that in some way, I think is useful. And I mean, theoretically, profit as well if you're selling products. I mean, is it worth looking at how much income profit you're making from standards and have that as something that you can measure, given it's an income?
Well, are we at least covering our costs as a starting point? That would be a great start. But yeah, I think we always saw this as a journey, and I think actually these comments are quite helpful, help you finding that so good. Raj.
A couple of points, thanks, Chair. I totally agree. When one thinks about NIBs, we think of reference. The reference piece is what comes up. And I think you do tremendous research work here. I mean, the polio one is a fantastic example in terms of it. So I think that socializing of that, even within this group, even before we go externally, is important because, that's what sort of comes to mind. My second question really is more comment in terms of, I'm trying to bridge between the external benchmarking discussion we had earlier on with other regulators, outward facing, and the service design work that's going on. As I was hearing that, I thought there's an inherent risk there that we need to think about. If you do go and do this sequentially, you do your service design first, you do your design work, then you go and get input from externally on benchmarking. You need to, one needs to make sure that there is room to accommodate anything that you're learning. Because the risk here is if it gets fixed and then you need to modify it, then you're running into another issue. So we need to really think through a little bit, I think, when is the right time to do it, so that you're not too far gone in the process of gelling the design, but you've got enough room there to make those changes that you are taking from outside. So I can understand the sequencing is important, because you can't hold this up, but you need to be strategic. At what point do you want to do it? I also think you've got to be really strategic going out there and making sure you compare apples with apples here when you're going to choose your regulators, that you are comparing apples with apples. The diversity of regulators globally is fairly wide. So choose like approach, so guiding principles. Then your feedback and adoption could be a lot more, somewhat easier. I wouldn't say a lot more easier, but certainly much more effective, because at the end of the day, to the chair's point, it's impact that we will get measured on. So just a thought around how we do that strategically.
I think that's helpful. Okay.
Yeah, just one final part. I think there's been really good discussion around, the impact, the quality, and the volume. I think the other thing is in the balanced scorecard, not to be shy about putting the key points in text rather than just a number.
Yeah.
Because I think out of context, the numbers, like that productivity number's 92, it's a bit like meaning of life and everything is 42. So I think we just need to not shy away from actually putting some context here as well, not just a number.
I think that's helpful. The narrative is important, I think, as far as that's concerned.
And just put it with the pictures, if you know.
Especially for non-executives who are not there day to day.
Yeah.
So, okay, Hader, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. I just had a question on the cash balance. So firstly, John, thank you for the paper, really, really interesting. And our significant underspend on the cash balance. I think it was highlighted that we'd spent less on our transformation due to delays in technology. And then later in Michael's paper, it talks about the reluctance to design our new ways of working, new processes, given that we haven't moved forward on the IT systems. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that a little, because sometimes it's better to design new ways of working without linking them directly to technology. It allows you a greater freedom of thought and better requirements for your technology when it comes in.
No, I think I'd certainly agree with you on that. I mean, there is no doubt that, compared with our plans of 4 or 5 months ago, projects have slipped to the right. There are a number of factors.
And by that you mean delayed?
Delayed.
Just to translate it.
Sorry.
Members of the public.
Yes, delayed. So some of that, I think, is more work to do between transformation and the IT side. We were actually discussing at EXCO, probably last week, that actually we've slightly seen them as two distinct streams, whereas actually they need to be one integrated one. And I know Claire, joining us, is very aware of that. We're also talked about the need to prioritise activities. June has set out a challenge of 5 key things that actually we need to deliver. I know our IT colleagues have experienced a sense of frustration, which is we asked them to go and prioritise a list of projects, and actually the list came back longer than when they were actually sent out. So we do need to slightly overcome that culture, I think. The other aspect is just a slightly technical one. We are in the process of retendering our application outsource provider. That's reached the evaluation stage, but the business case approval is likely to take 3 or 4 months with Department of Health, Cabinet Office and Treasury. And we have a bit of a catch-22 around do you give new projects to the current provider or the next one? And that's something that we'll be engaging with Claire when she's full-time to try and square that circle. But generally, you're right. Things are delayed. We need to try and track that, and that is contribute. You know, there are other things contributing to the underspend, but that's a key factor. Is our project spend.
Yeah. Could I maybe just bring Claire into the conversation? Claire obviously just joined the agency. You know, you've got a lot of experience of developing new systems. I just wondered if there's any sort of general words of how you want to approach this in your new role, in terms of identifying the needs and then getting something done.
Yeah, well, quite a few things. So it might sound surprising coming from me, but some of the problems that we have around efficiencies and the way that systems and services work don't necessarily have to be fixed by only technology. So we've talked about process re-engineering and so on, and service design, and then technology coming in later maybe to support that. But in the meantime, there's what we call the MVP. So what can we do without technology and lots of spend? I think, and it's just an observation given my status and not having been here, but the linkage between whether it's Laura's area, transformation and technology, I can't see in a strong way, but that might just be through my lens at my status at this time. So I think there's a lot to do there. And when we talk about prioritisation of the technology roadmap, I think we need, and I will refresh that. I don't want to change things for the sake of it, but I also won't shy away from being disruptive in a positive way, but in collaboration with colleagues about what we need to prioritise. And it might not just be the view from the technology space as well.
See, I think that's so vitally important, because I don't think the implementation of our technology programme is just down to Claire. I think when it comes to Safety Connected, Alison's got to be responsible. When it comes to the regulatory systems, Laura will be involved. It comes to some of the business planning tools, John's got to own that. And actually you're the enabler in the middle of that. So it's, again, got to be a team-based effort.
Yeah, well, if you think about what makes up MHRA and what makes it successful, it's all those different components working in that collaborative way, in a joined-up way. And I think a lot of the time we do talk about technology, digital data and technology, DDAT, in the sense of being an enabler and support, and that's fine and expected. But also a term that I like to use, disruptive innovation. So sometimes being led by technology where appropriate, maybe not on high risk sort of projects and services, but there's something that we can do in that space as well, I think, just to try and push things. But we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, no, great. Well, it's great to have you on board, and can't wait for you to start full time to really get motoring on this.
Me too.
Okay, I'm just very conscious of time, but I think it's been hopefully a helpful conversation there, John. There was just one thing I wanted to flag up, which was around our corporate overheads. If you exclude the technology, which I think biases it completely, so the corporate overhead excluding technology has gone up from 12.3 to 13.6 to 16.1 to 16.9% over 4 quarters. And I think, bear in mind our ambition is to reduce our corporate overhead, we have to address that. So that's something we can't change the past, but we can change the future. So I think we've got to keep a very close eye on that one. We always said that the balanced scorecard was going to be an iteration. We don't have another board meeting until January. But with some of the comments that you've received today, John, could I ask that we look to again upgrade some of the metrics? I know it can't all be done in one go, but I think it will be a journey. But I think if we can again keep seeing progress each time this comes back to the board, I think that would be very, very helpful. Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much for that. That being the case, I'm sorry it's a bit of a John Fundry roadshow, and we're going to go straight on to now. Okay, they're the performance metrics. Now let's look at our strategic deliverables and our delivery plan, and in particular the Q2 deliverables, which are in the board paper starting on page 37. Again, you can assume we've read it, John, just to save your voice, but is there any sort of key points you want to draw our attention to? And we'll go to questions.
Thanks, Chair. So for the benefit of people perhaps viewing this, when we talk about delivery plan, we really mean our business plan in a business sense or government sense. But some time ago, the board took a strategic decision, first of all, to shorten the timescale for our business plan. So the delivery plan does focus very deliberately on a 2-year period. to enable us to undertake the transformation and then reassess what we were doing. We use internally our Delivery and Performance Committee, which is a subcommittee of our Executive Committee, to look at progress on the delivery plan. That committee and EXCO have been taking on board actually Mandy's comment at a recent meeting around potentially focusing on watermelons. In other words, areas that look green outside and are red inside. So as a result of that analogy, actually EXCO took the decision to downgrade some of the RAG statuses in the paper. So we have had a hard look at those. Overall, we continue to still make good progress. I have to say, personally, I'm quite surprised by that, because there is a shed load of stuff going on in the agency associated with COVID, vaccines, etc. And I think it is genuinely impressive that, you know, the various teams on the delivery plan are still delivering in that context. When we developed the delivery plan, we did ask people to consciously be careful about scheduling activities in Q3, Q4, which is when we see the main organisational changes coming through. I have to say personally, I'm not sure that everyone took that on board. So I would expect in the next couple of quarters, perhaps we'll see a lot less green and amber on this, but we'll wait and see. So just a flag, I think, for future ones, but overall, pretty good progress in the first 6 months.
I'd echo that. I think there is very good progress in the last 6 months relative to all the internal discussions that we've been having. So credit to everyone involved in that. And I think it's helpful to be starting to look forward, John, as well. So I really like your sort of, if you like, advanced warning of being careful. How will the executive committee sort of start to manage and mitigate that? Because obviously identifying there's a potential issue ahead is one thing. You know, what are we practically going to do to address that?
So actually one of the things we're consciously been doing is trying to make the connection between the delivery plan and the risk management framework. So to try and get that a bit more of a virtuous cycle, if you like. You know, just talking about the reserves, the cash balances as we have been earlier, we've already set up for several weeks now a process of our resources committee meeting weekly in order to consider additional items of expenditure that where we can use those reserves that still demonstrate value for money. One of the criteria for assessment of those proposals is it linked to the delivery plan, and are there issues associated with it? So we've had, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, a number of areas where we've agreed additional resource for a brief period of time to try and alleviate some of the pressures here. Now, those that continue beyond March, we'll need to consider how we address those, but actually the early signs are that's being helpful.
Yeah. Again, if colleagues just allow me, one of my key points I wanted to raise was around the rating of that particular issue. So I'm wondering why you know, the use of the available cash reserves is actually, you've labelled it as amber red, when it's quite clear with the forecast that we've presented to the Department of Health at our quarterly accountability meeting that we're not going to spend all the reserves. So that looks more than red, it looks like a failure to me. And I'm wondering why it's only been rated as amber red.
Well, I guess there's still time to come. Personally, you know, I don't anticipate us being able to spend all of it, but I do anticipate us being able to eat into it. So in the last couple of weeks, we've spent north of $500,000, approaching $1 million on various activities. There are more underway to address critical areas. So we've currently got an available balance of that 14 or 15 million. Will we address all of that? Probably not, but we are attempting to use it sensibly for justifiable purposes.
Yeah, and I recognise you're in a difficult position because you and June have both got to think about the value for money aspect to all this. So it's not just spend. Clearly, it's got to be done responsibly. But I think the other chief officers, I would be expecting to be pushing you very, very hard because actually we have available resources, and we know that next year it will be much tighter. So if there is the opportunity to do useful work and useful investments for the future, I think we should really be using these investments. But personally, I would see that as a red, that we should be trying to have a much more proactive mitigation for, than just trying to say politely, it's not going quite as well as we would have liked, which is the way it comes over us. So that would be my personal take. Sorry to hog the floor. Colleagues, Michael.
Yeah, again, I support this. John, one thing I'm aware of, that to utilise the spend on reserves, one of the things that HR are looking at is bringing forward work to support the new structure. You know, and I think this is critical. So we're going through transformation, we're putting in place a new operating model. People will be filling posts, little management posts, where they may not necessarily have all the right experience. So I think it's really important that we are investing in their support and development. And I know, which I support as well, HR have identified a number of projects that they might be able to advance to do that. And I wondered where we are in that, because we have only got 4 months of this financial year left. I take your point about, yes, it could still all happen, but my experience is if you haven't got it agreed in November or December, you just don't spend the money. So on that particular issue about HR supporting people in the new organisational structure, where are we?
So, thanks, Michael. So you saw the summary of proposals at Audit and Risk. That, I think, well, so first of all, I think there is a very good purpose to that. It's underpinning cultural work, management training, work for people in new positions. So, it's clearly justified under the transformation side. The advantage we do have with that is, first of all, there's a clear requirement for it. And secondly, generally, we can use existing providers, either using civil service learning or existing contracts that we have. The issue we often get with trying to spend our reserves in effective fashion is, government procurement rules. Over £10,000 we have to go through a procurement process, and that takes time, and that's what slows down the process. Whereas in that case, it is reasonably ready money, and actually there are a whole host of proposals under the HR banner. So one of the ones we're considering at the moment is a leave buyback proposal. So because of COVID, a number of our members of staff have built up substantial balances. We've increased the carry forward to avoid them losing it whilst the pressure is still underway. Some of them may want to actually opt for a cash payment instead. Again, that's something that we could reasonably easily implement, etc. So there are proposals underway. Will we spend the 14 or 15 million? Still a heavy caveat, but actually things are beginning to move.
I think that proactive approach is very helpful, John.
I just want to finish on the emphasis I give, but it relates to the point you made, Chair, earlier, that if you look at our staff survey results where it says we don't walk the talk, we need to support that new cadre of managers from day one so that they have the skills and ability to help change that culture. Civil Service College, great, but there are others out there who I think could probably do better. So my only, I'll probably ask the question again, is we need to invest in MHRA people to get that level of leadership that we expect.
Yeah, and just picking up on that, Michael, I referred to civil service learning. They have a number of umbrella contracts, which again enable you to place work pretty promptly. So, for example, on the management development training, one of their retained providers is KPMG. We already have a proposal for that, which is being looked at. So that work is underway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that granular detail is actually really helpful, John, to understand that. Okay, colleagues, any other questions on this area? Okay, I wanted just to pick up another one, if I may. Just on page 41, John, it talks about legacy systems, and on that it actually says that the intention is to overhaul the legacy systems by Q1 22-23. So that really is effectively June next year, which is 7.5 months away. And I'm just wondering, is it genuinely realistic to overhaul our legacy systems within that length of time?
So, again, I might defer to Claire's impending arrival on this. Will we have overhauled our legacy systems in that period? No. But there are distinct deliverables on the way. So, for example, ensuring that the key data in Sentinel is migrated to the cloud, protected, and that we can access them. Plans are underway to do that, and I think that's a major deliverable.
Exactly.
Will we have replaced Sentinel with a new system by then? No, almost certainly not.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I think the specificity becomes important, because when you just read the words, I read overhaul as replace, and that isn't sensible, and I didn't think that was ever possible. However, there will be some absolute critical milestones that will be necessary to enable that eventually to happen. So I think let's make sure we can be specific when we're making the claims.
And at the risk of sounding like a civil service debate on this, the actual deliverable is finalise our plan. So it's not replace. But I agree, it's still red.
Yeah, I wasn't argued about that one.
Chair, may I ask one question? I'm really interested in Claire's experience. This whole thing about migrating data into the cloud, big system. But from your experience in other government departments, how long would that normally take?
Well, it depends. You look at it from a technology perspective, and you look at it from a technology perspective and commercial perspective, capability and capacity perspective within the organisation. So all of those things, that would be the evaluation, and then out would come the answer. So it can take weeks and months to something much more significant, depending on volumetrics and infrastructure already in place. But when we're talking about whether it's improving, changing, overhauling, replacing legacy systems, it's not necessarily just a big bang approach that we need. So replace one with another. I was talking to Laura last week about maybe applying a strangler pattern, so removing parts of it. You have to think about the complications around dependencies and things that are tightly coupled, but that might be an approach as well. So take a part of it, small or big, replace that, and create some APIs to be able to join those systems together and so on. So there's lots of different approaches to think about there. And it might be sort of on the road to improving and phasing out, rather than a sort of big overhaul and replacement in one go.
Thank you. Okay. I think that sounds like a very innovative approach, actually, Claire, which is, because this is a really big deal. We cannot afford for our fundamental systems to fall over. So we have to do that in a risk proportionate way. And I think the way you're describing it in terms of doing it in pieces, to my mind, makes a lot of sense to a layperson. Not pretending to be a technical architect like your good self, but so that would be my views. Okay, that's great. Okay, colleagues. So we're asked to. Are we content that we are delivering on our key objectives? And are we assured that we're moving in the right direction as far as the strategy is concerned? So I think, John, it's been a very helpful discussion again. So it's maybe time to take a break now, and we'll move on to something else if that's okay. But let's note the report, please, Natalie, with thanks to the team, because actually I think, as John said in his introduction, we've achieved a lot of stuff in a very difficult time for our staff going through change, and we're still keeping the eye on the deliverables. So let's do that. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next item, please, and that's the innovative licensing and access pathway. And in particular, what has that pathway delivered and how will it be developed? And I'm very pleased that we're going to welcome Dan O'Connor onto the screen. Dan's official job title, I think, is Expert Medical Assessor from the Medicines Licensing team. But actually, I think as Mark and I were discussing earlier, we should really say he's the architect of ILAP. So Dan, very welcome to have you with us today. So thank you for all your work on this really important initiative. What I'm going to do is to ask Mark just to make some introductory comments, and then we'll go to questions, and hopefully we'll then be able to hear from you, Dan, in terms of your answer to a number of the questions the board colleagues might have. But Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, this is a real pleasure because this is a chance to talk about one of the great successes that the agency has had in the past few months. So, what happened was that, of course, we were looking at a big change as we were transitioning out of the EU and the need to revise how we were looking at improving access and meeting a big government drive to make the UK a more attractive area. And so Dan and a number of colleagues actually worked very hard internally, just kind of effectively brainstorming. We use the phrase tiger team to come up with a structure for an improved innovative licensing and access pathway. And that was about May, June last year. What's been equally fantastic is that we have then implemented, so that the ILAP was launched on 1st of January. You can see in the paper significant success about the innovative pathway, and it's a significant success in bringing other partners on board, huge impact from industry. But of course, what we have here is a developing process. We have started, we haven't yet fully come up with a mature process. And so today I'm very much looking forward to the board's views on what else could we do, what might need to improve out of what we're doing. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Dan, maybe I could ask you the first question, if that's okay. I'm just interested in what you're most proud of with this particular new pathway and what you think the biggest impact has been so far.
Thank you, Chair. I think launching on the 1st of January on time, I think, is probably one thing I'm really proud of. But honestly, I think it's the way we've managed to embed patients really rapidly into the ILAP. I mean, I'm really thrilled that we managed to do that. We have a patient and public reference group, and they're real strong advocates for supporting the ILAP, and we've got them really working very hard with us to develop the patient centricity of the ILAP. So I think it's the patient focus, which was a clear launch ambition, but I think we're really making inroads to that at the moment. Thank you.
That's great. Oh, thank you for that. Colleagues, we've got lots of content here. Mercy.
Well, I'll start on that very issue, Dan. So I was really pleased in 3.4 to see that I know the Patient Safety and Engagement Committee had an early look at ILAP, and one of the things we were asking was about having patients on the steering group, and I note that they're here. So thank you very much. That's great. So it's a really good development, and I also note that we're learning with the medical devices pilot as well. So that's really kind of useful kind of stuff. I was really going to ask Dan and Mark about capacity, because obviously you're having great success. You have lots of applications at the moment, and I was just wondering about kind of resourcing that, and also how the fee structure kind of fits into that as well.
So, Mark, do you want to start? And then
I will start. Thank you very much. It's a very good question. Resourcing has been one of the challenges because we've been a victim of success. As the paper says, we're expecting 30 to 40 passport applications. We received 65. We're delivering on it. But of course, we are also at this stage going through transformation and looking at the ways we're working. So it is something that we're actively seeking about how can we improve the resourcing. Also, we have the fee structure project, which is where we're looking at all the fees across the agency, and we have flagged that maybe the fees for what we're doing are poorly pitched and we need to improve it. So yes, it is a challenge. One of the other features that maybe not come through the paper is that it's a challenge shared. We're delivering with partners, and we also need to work quite closely to make sure that these resourcing questions you raise are adequately delivered across the partners. So yes, that's something where we're working a lot at the moment.
Maybe I could just bring Dan in just to build on that. We talk about resources very generally, but I'm just wondering, what, Dan, you see as the real pinch points. What's the expertise or the skill or the particular type of people that maybe we're short of that would actually help to accelerate more products through this particular pathway?
Thank you, and thanks for the question. I mean, indeed, that it is a mark of success. I mean, we're thrilled to see the interest that we're getting, but that has presented some challenges because ILAP tries to create a very different way of working and a different way of thinking. And there's a degree of cultural change. There's a degree of, we're working with 3 other partners. We're working much closely with our patient representatives. So I think over time, particularly for the Innovation Passports, I think we're getting very close to business as usual, actually, with the Innovation Passports. I think we're pretty pleased about how that's going, and that's the gateway. So that's the designation, the new medicines designation. The TDP delivery is a much more complicated process because it's not only MHRA, and one of the fantastic things about the ILAP is bringing in lots of different expertise from across the agency to really offer that end-to-end approach for the development of these new medicines or indications. So that is taking a little bit more time to bed in. But again, I think once we get more used to delivering the TDP and we've built on the processes that we need to do that. And I think the digital offer that we're hoping to launch in January will also support us in terms of automating some of the resource that we require. But there's no doubt we do need key personnel in terms of expertise, in terms of scientists, regulatory expertise, clinicians, statisticians, etc. So there is a strong need to ensure that we retain all of the expertise that we have to be able to deliver these target development profile roadmaps.
Okay, thank you for that. Good question, Lucy. Junaid.
So I think this is fantastic, and I think you've mentioned this already, Dan and Mark, that surely this should become business as usual. So this should become, in terms of the spearhead of the one agency approach, in terms of how we work in the future. This is what you're modelling moving forward, which is fantastic. And I just wondered, when does it become business as usual, do you think? And then if this is the entry point, when as I look through elements of the paper, when you start thinking about real-world evidence, you've got the CPRD element to it, but are we also thinking about like a secondary care CPRD? So we're not just looking at the primary care data assets, but we're looking at secondary care and indeed perhaps broader data sets to not just think about the entry point for licensing, but then also thinking through the entire regulatory journey of that product, wherever it might be.
Yeah. Maybe can I actually bring June in on this particular point, because June, we've talked about ILAP becoming the business as usual. Yeah. What's your ambition with this particular pathway?
It is, through our look at services, to start to build on what has been so successful. It has met a need, it's brought in the various perspectives much earlier in the piece, and we can see the value of that. And so, as Junaid is saying, it does need to become normalised, systematic. And I think there are ways, as we do the service redesign and work with our technology, maybe a disruptive, innovative approach, that we can actually make sure that is the platform for the future. Not to try and use words that don't mean anything, but the concepts are, eternal concepts. There should be no non-ILAP product, actually. There is no product that shouldn't reach, we should embed that. So I think it has proven itself as the sort of torchbearer for what new regulation should look like, and that we don't ever see the end point as a license granted. It is actually the bedside, or even better, the health outcome.
Okay, and maybe bringing you into the conversation again, Dan, is there anything stopping this ILAP becoming the normal regulatory pathway, or that might not be called ILAP anymore, it's just the way we regulate products?
No, I mean, we do have quite a broad and inclusive definition of innovation. So the criteria, I think, really fit. They fit repurposed medicines, and they fit truly innovative, very new products such as the gene therapy products. But also just building on that question, I mean, we do have the tools of the toolkit. So we're absolutely able to create new tools. And so that suggestion around sort of hospital data is an absolute great one in terms of building on our ambition to integrate real world data. So definitely a lot for us to learn in the last sort of 8 to 10 months, but I think we are really building the ILAP to be the main route for licensing within the MHRA.
Okay. And Mark, just coming to you, thinking about how we then think about devices, and because obviously at the moment it's a medicines pathway, effectively.
Yes.
But we've talked before, a couple of months ago, around how we can bring devices, and thinking of your previous expertise in this area as well. What would be your ambition around devices and innovative access to devices?
Well, my ambition is to take advantage of the timing we've got. Just at the moment, we are in the point of revising legislation on devices, and so this is a key bit to actually really embed them. Now, devices is something which, as an agency, we're looking now how we bring together much more closely with clinical trials And so we're actually right at that point of really looking at some fundamentals on this. So I think we basically will come up with what we call an IDAP, an Innovative Devices Access Pathway, which will fit the legislation, but we've got to go much further. We've got to start bringing in tools on top around particularly the use of software in these. So it's early stages with the devices, but I think there's a lot of exciting ways to go.
Good. It was a trick question. I was just trying to make sure we hadn't forgotten about it.
Yeah.
So you haven't forgotten about it, so thank you for that. That's very helpful. Colleagues, Mandy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, as an agency, we shouldn't undervalue this. I think it is innovative, and I think it can be quite game changing. And I think with devices, maybe we should be thinking about innovative therapy, because devices and medicines working together is going to be really important, and if they go two separate pathways, we might miss something. The other thing I think in terms of this is the focus on patients, as you said, Dan, is really, really important. And we have to get that embedded in industry because they see it as an add-on. And we have to change the way industry are thinking about the importance of patients and surveillance, because they're potentially going to make a lot of money from this. So we need to actually push into their development programs that data that's needed for surveillance, because and I think that's where it's going to come from, not add it on later. And it's worthwhile for them. So I think we have to be quite commercially savvy about this, about where the balance of money is, but eventually that data has to come from industry as well, and we have to get them to do development differently, because they're saying, oh, what do I do with patients? Really, not quite, but there's a million different ways of doing it, and I think it can actually change the paradigm. I don't know what like Graham, you're working in clinical trials and things like that, but I think we shouldn't undervalue this.
Graham, were you wanting to come on that point?
Separate point, actually.
Okay.
No, I agree with that.
I'm just thinking, Dan, there's 2 points there. Innovative therapy pathway, I quite like that idea, I'm just thinking practically, you talk about needing expertise, so we'll still need specialist expertise to be able to do that, but can you see any practical reason why we couldn't almost have the same pathway, but there's individual product specialisations needed to be able to have a single innovative therapy pathway, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I mean the regulatory frameworks are different, but there are obviously similarities, and I think there's a lot we can learn in terms of the approach from the ILAP. I mean, having the designation, I think, is a really important part. I mean, the criteria may not always fit for devices versus medicines, so we might need to review that. But I think many of the key elements of the pathway are applicable to devices, the challenges, but also the opportunities to think and practice differently. And I think they're absolutely applicable to any innovative product. And just quickly building on the patient component, we do have the dedicated patient engagement tool. So the enhanced patient engagement, and our patient and public reference group are working up a best practice guidance, which is absolutely going to help industry sponsors to know what good looks like from the patient's perspective. So what should be mentioned in the criteria for the potential to offer benefit for patients? What would be good look like in terms of that engagement? So that's a piece of work we're doing, and hopefully we'll have that first iteration of that document in the coming couple of months. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Okay, Graham.
I think just quickly we should pilot for devices then, if we can take that decision. I can remember a meeting not long ago about a robotic knee replacement. We should just pick something that is disruptive technology and pilot this. Just even if you want to do it as a theoretical exercise, otherwise we won't break through.
Okay, Raj, you want to come in on this point?
Yeah. I was thinking I think one word of caution is devices are so wide. The scope of devices is massive, so you've got to be really careful how you want to segment this out. But if you're thinking of an innovative therapeutics approach, you could almost think, and I'm waving my hands around, you could start with almost a set of principles for innovative therapeutic, and then have criteria of devices that are likely to come into that. Because then you can exclude, by doing that, you'll exclude the devices that won't come in. Then you bifurcate, because they will have to take, but then when you come back at the patient level, you need to come back together. So that way you're pragmatic around the complexities of devices and medicines, but you are tapping into where they need to come together. And the end-to-end approach that June was talking about, that way you have it at the beginning and you have it at the end, but you allow for diversity in the middle.
Yeah, well, a big part of the medical device consultations going on at the moment is around a risk proportionate approach. So not all devices going through exactly the same approach, and so I think that supports that perfectly.
And one additional thing, and I'm going to pick up on what Mandy said, increasingly we are going to see, in diagnostics, I'm going to use the word diagnostics or devices, increasingly we're going to see almost a concept of companion diagnostics.
Yes.
They go either to predict, diagnose, or to monitor, or to look for treatment efficiencies. So they're going to play a really important role, I think, in the future of how it comes. So maybe we become a bit proactive as an agency and think, and I love the idea of June, pick a disease area where you can bring this in and test it, so that we actually have that learning early on. Because I think the pipeline is going to be very much hand in hand. If you look at something like Alzheimer's, you're not going to treat Alzheimer's without a biomarker of some kind, beginning, during, and after, right? So I think that's the one that comes to my mind very quickly. So something, great idea, I think, June. And I love the idea of innovative therapeutics. You could test it on a pilot, and you bring the two together.
Okay, June, you want to take that forward?
Well, with the team, but I think it's, again, breaking into a new advance.
And I think that's been respectful.
Prototype, ILAP.
We can be respectful of the different regulatory frameworks, but actually see if we can find a way to use some of this methodology to genuinely advance new, in a broader sense, therapies for patient benefit. So I think that sounds a very good idea. Graham, you had a separate point, I think.
Yeah, well, a few things if I can be brief. I mean, first of all, thank you. It's great innovation, and the paper's great. I suppose in the paper, I was looking for what we might be watching in terms of progress. And I mean, I think June touched on this briefly, but clearly part of this is about when things get to patients. And clearly it's early days. But when can we start to get a sense of that? And is there something we can track about time until things are actually going to get to patients as a measure of success? And secondly, I mean, I understand obviously confidentiality is important, but getting a sense of the type of things coming through would be quite helpful. When they've been announced publicly, you can Google, and that's fine. But getting a sense of just the categories of kind of medicines, I think, would be a helpful steer. A couple of specific questions was really...
Should we maybe just pause there and maybe just answer those two? Dan, just in terms of, can you just give us sort of an overview of the type of therapies that are coming through the ILAP process, just briefly?
Hi, sorry, I lost internet there. So yes, I can just briefly say, so the 2 points around transparency. So we are working quite closely with colleagues in the partnership to understand better how much we can publish. And we do see that it's important for us to be more transparent about the types of products that we see. We are seeing a variety of different therapeutic areas. So the main therapeutic area is oncology, as you might expect, because we have the FDA Orbis oncology route to medicines as part of the ILAP offer for international routes to marketing authorization. But it is something that we are actively pursuing. Probably initially it will be metrics and numbers in terms of the different therapeutic areas, but over time, if we reach agreement with the trade associations around how much information we can release, that's something we're very pleased to do. In terms of performance, ultimately, it is a pathway about access for patients, so it's a really key performance measure. And I think probably in the coming sort of year to 18 months, we might be able to get some signals around how much quicker we might be moving through the pathway as these products mature through the ILAP process. Thank you, and sorry about that technical issue.
No worries. Alison, I'm just wondering, because obviously there's an inevitable linkage to your area, it's looking at sort of in-use safety monitoring. Have you had your team had any involvement in terms of ILAP and actually the follow-through into the use situation?
Yeah, obviously, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's very important that if we have early access to medicines, we marry that up with a really robust vigilance process down the line. And certainly, we're having conversations and we're talking with the ILAP team about, as products come through, to make sure we have a very robust risk management process in place.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a helpful sort of just linkage, because it's obviously happening, but I think it was useful to be explicit that it's happening. Graham, sorry, I cut you off halfway through.
No, that's good. So the second thing was really some specific questions about collaborations that aren't in there yet. And I think, I mean, the first one was about MHRA, which is mentioned as a discussion, and it's personal bias because they pay my salary. But I mean, there seems to be a clear opportunity here for engaging with the research agenda, which would benefit both the agency and the companies. And I'd just be interested to know how well that's progressing and if there's anything we can do to move that forward. And then secondly, sort of touching on what Raj was saying about companion diagnostics and biomarkers, whether there's a role for NIPS, and can there be an early engagement around things that might be a barrier in terms of standards for a companion diagnostic that can be part of the pathway. So it's really probably one for Dan and one for you, Mark.
Yeah. So, Mark?
In terms of NIBS, yes, we have actually got NIBS senior management on the steering committee, and we've also looked at how rapidly we could develop a companion diagnostics or standardisation for any product coming through. So one of the things we've offered is biological activity testing, which we could start developing and validating early as they approach through. So that's a tool that's there. And yes, we would look to see what else we can do around the NIPS capabilities to support ILAP.
Great. Okay. And National Institute of Health Research, Dan, has there been any collaboration with them at all yet, or not, from your point of view?
Yeah, no, there's been excellent collaboration, actually. I mean, just building on the initial comment around the companion diagnostics, we have, you may have seen that we have a number of tools that are potentially under development, and there is a companion diagnostic tool that we are considering developing in the ILAP, and we have the continuous benefit risk integrating real world evidence tool to ensure that more life cycle approach to evidence generation and ensuring that those benefits always outweigh the risks. So in terms of the NIHR, we have we had a number of discussions with them. I've given a couple of talks actually to the different teams to help embed the kind of understanding of what ILAP can offer. And I think we're at the stage of kind of at the point, where we kind of understanding where NIHR might be able to fit into the ILAP, how they might support the end-to-end process in terms of the delivery of the clinical trials. And I hope in the coming couple of months that we might have an update in terms of the status. Thank you.
Good. Okay, that's great. Well, again, just conscious of time, but I think there's been quite a rich discussion there. Again, I think congratulations to Dan and the team for putting this together. I know it's not just Dan, but I know you've been very central to this. So we do appreciate all your efforts. It strikes me there's lots of opportunities. I think that's the sense of the discussion I just had, all over the place here. It's not just around devices. It's not just around making it business as usual. It's not just around patient engagement. It's not just around measuring impact on patients and further collaborations. It's frankly all of them. And I think that's the opportunity that's presented. So I think it's fair to say the board is very supportive of this programme of work. I think actually it would be very useful to come back and have a further update in, I don't know, maybe another sort of 4 to 6 months, something of that order. We don't want you to come back monthly because we need you to do the work, Dan. But you'll be pleased to know. But I think actually, because this is strategically important and is actually really completely bound in to the life sciences vision and our place of actually making the UK a genuine research hub for future medical product innovation, it's a key asset. And I think we want to keep a close eye and continue to support you in any way that we can. So thank you to the team for that, and obviously we'll note the report, but I think actually Dan and Mark, a number of suggestions there that I think we can helpfully take forward. Okay, thanks Dan, have a good day, cheers for your time. Okay, I allowed that conversation to overrun because I thought it was so interesting, to be fair, so I'm going to ask Mandy and Michael to be as concise as they can for their 2 assurance reports. So we've got 2 assurance reports. The first one from the Organisation, Development and Remuneration Committee. Mandy as new chair and first assurance report. You can assume we've read it, but it's on page 59 of the board pack. Any key points you want to bring to our attention?
Yeah, maybe just a couple really. One is the importance of setting the services and the scenarios about size and shape and what we will be delivering is absolutely key and fundamental, and we can't get away from that, but we must be very conscious of not chasing our tails, and we can't do the organisation because we don't know the services and we go round in circles. So I think there was a clear message back really around the importance of that, but there are many moving parts, but it shouldn't stop us from making progress. There needs to be closer collaboration, we think, with the transformation and the HR component, so the services and everything else, and the HR processes which are affecting all of the staff. We were assured that the HR processes are under control and working well. We emphasise the importance of timescale, and also the other thing that come out is the motivation of staff, and to make sure that that is this due process to ensure staff are kept motivated, and that this is done, the positive opportunities are emphasised, and we constantly keep a track with staff at all levels around how they're feeling, not just through formal processes, but particularly through leadership and line management. And we also talked a little bit about the balanced scorecard, which I think we've covered, but the importance of monitoring our diversity and inclusion a bit more clearly than we're doing at the moment, and there's some plans to do that. So those are probably the key points. Keep transformation, services and HR working together, speed of the organisational development, and our motivation of our staff.
Okay. June, is there anything else that you want to add to Mercer's report by way of context?
I think just to say how much it's valued to have that separate look. We're very embedded and engrossed in what's happening at the moment, and I think actually having the opportunity to go above that and have the clarity that Mandy's just given, to refocus on the link between moving the parts but actually the HR processes, and importantly morale and motivation, because without that it won't succeed. Yeah. So just really to reinforce what an important discussion this has been, to sort of reset our thinking, and also to look forward to December, because by then we'll have much more clarity on the services, but we'll also have, I hope, got a fair amount moving on the HR side.
Okay, so I think it's a case of decisions getting made, and then get out of the wheel spin and start moving things forward. Yeah, I think it's probably the summation. Okay, colleagues, it's an assurance report from a subset of the board. Some of you have been involved in this. Any other questions, or can we be assured that we've identified the issues, at least, that there's more work to be done in terms of implementing the issues, I think? Okay, I think people are content. Okay, so on that basis, let's note the report. We are assured that, and I think this is actually really important, that we are monitoring and making sure we progress the transformation, and we make sure the different components are linked together. So thank you for that. The other assurance report we've got is from Michael, the chair of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. Michael, again, you can assume that we've read it, but are there any particular key points you want to draw to our attention? Because there were obviously 2 or 3 actions that you were asked to complete on behalf of the board.
Yes, Chair, very, very briefly. At a very high level, I can give assurance that the agency is doing all the right things in terms of management, learning lessons, and trying to make further progress. I think the second point I'd make, and it relates to the issue that was delegated to us by the board, if you look at the sequencing of activity, so we have transformation, we've gone through consultation, we're going to agree the operating model. The operating model gives us greater certainty as to how we determine the agency's sustainable cost base. That then feeds into determination of fee. So the sequencing is right, but I would say that there are still, and it relates to Mandy's point, a number of uncertainties that we have to get through. So the issue around the digital spend, a lot depends ultimately on the settlement from the spending review, and the inherent risk is that key expenditure, possibly for valid reasons, is delayed, and that then does have a knock-on effect in the financial sustainability of the agency in future years, and I think the key year, and John can correct me, is 22-23. If some of that expenditure is not made in this year, we will likely to incur a more significant deficit, and what that would mean is that we would have to take remedial action. But having said that, I think the good thing is that finance and colleagues are looking at a range of scenarios that could be enacted should we get ourselves in or should that situation arise. So the assurance is, as I come back to, we're doing the right things, but there are still a number of uncertainties there, and I will keep coming back to the point about digital really support Claire coming in, but progress has got to be faster in my view in that area, and I think we've been saying that for a number of years.
Yeah. Okay, John, just thinking of any additional context that you want to add to this?
Not really, actually, Chair. I mean, I think we took the Audit and Risk Committee through both our updated forecast for the rest of this year and also our 3-year outlook. So I think Michael's summarised very accurately the challenges we do. We are highly dependent on the outcome of the spending review for next year, and if that's reduced in any significant fashion, we will significantly need to pull back. Not in terms of our operating spend, because actually the changes we're going to make broadly get that to balance, but the investment in transformation and crucially in new systems will be under severe pressure in that eventuality. So Michael's very right to highlight that risk.
Yeah, you see, and I think this is also the point, isn't it? Because I think losing the trading fund status is a fundamental change to the way that we operate. So we will not be able to run a deficit in the 1st of April onwards. We'll have to live within our means, and if that means that we can't get all the income that we need or the support we need from government, then we'll have to cut our cloth, and that's a very difficult situation. So I think what you're saying, John, is operationally we'll be in balance, but actually it's the investments that potentially are at risk, which is even more reason to get projects underway now, I think, is the way that I would interpret that. And I think Michael's impatience is too polite, but I think his impatience that we need to be progressing the technology programme. So sorry it keeps coming back to you, not just about you, Claire, but I think it's clear that there's a strong feeling around the board table that we do need to make progress on some of these components. Okay, so thank you for the assurance report. Are there any other specific questions anybody wanted to raise or any additional context? So I think we accept that the uncertainties exist. I think the continuing review of the process, I know John and his team and the executive committee look at this on a monthly basis. Michael, when will the audit and risk assurance be next looking at this?
Meeting on I think it's the 25th or 26th of January, so a report will come to the board in February. The
February board. So, okay, I think, well, thank you for that. If you need any more additional support, please ask. But I think let's note the report with thanks. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the substantive items. And actually, by being very brief on the assurance items, that means we've got more time for public questions and answers. So, which is a great opportunity to, first of all, to welcome Rachel Bosworth. Rachel is our Director of Communications. Hello, Rachel. And you've been obviously tracking the chat on the Zoom webinar. We've also got a number of pre-submitted questions. So I suggest that we start with the pre-submitted questions from members of the public, as a number of individuals took the opportunity to submit questions last week. So let's start with those, and then we'll come to the questions on chat after that. So, Rachel, over to you for the first question, please.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, and thanks to everyone who's submitted questions. I think we've got an absolutely record number of questions this month. So first of all, first question is about yellow card, and the questioner asked us how we could improve the public's knowledge of yellow card reporting.
Okay, Alison, can I ask you to answer that?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for this question. So it's good we've got a little bit of time, because I can just give a little bit more detail. So, as probably everyone is aware, public knowledge of the yellow card scheme is actually at its highest level due to the coverage it's received during the pandemic, and this results in high volumes of reports, not just for vaccines, but increasingly now for medicines. However, we know we can always do better, and we are continuing to seek to further raise the awareness of the scheme with the public. And we continually and regularly run campaigns using the range of MHRA social media platforms, many of which are actually supported by our patient organisations and also healthcare professional organisations. And so an example of that was the use of social media during World Patient Safety Day in 2021, and more recently the annual Med Safety Week, which was just last week actually, and MHRA led this campaign in collaboration with the Uppsala Monitoring Centre, and over 60 regulators across the globe really working together to promote reporting of suspected side effects in their respective countries. Of course, it's very important to get that international picture, because it actually enhances our own yellow card reports. And through such activities, we're also completely redesigning our yellow card platform. It's called Safety Connect, and as part of this programme of work, we do a future yellow cards communication plans to promote this platform further and the significant capabilities it gives us to connect with patients. And just lastly, a couple of other things. We have 5 commissioned yellow card centres, which also promote and educate reporters locally, which I think is very important. And they provide promotional material and other routes to engage with the local community. And of course, we work with our Patient Consultative Forum and other mechanisms for patient engagement to continually try and raise awareness. So a package of measures, really.
Okay, I think that sounds excellent as a whole package of measures, as you rightly say there. So I think, Rachel, hopefully that answers that particular question. So the second question, we're actually joined today by Anne-Lieb Arshad, and Anne-Lieb has actually kindly consented to appear on our video, so very nice to meet you this morning. And I understand you had a question on the medical device regulation consultation.
I did. Thank you very much for allowing me to ask my question, and thank you very much for a very interesting meeting this morning. So my question is quite simple. It's about the consultation, as you say, and really just wanted to know how soon after the consultation closes can we expect results? Will we expect any results, and will any summaries be provided before moving on to the next stages?
Okay, well, thank you for that. I forgot to ask you what your affiliation is as well, actually, Anne-Lieb.
I'm just a member of the public.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Laura, can you answer that one?
Yes, I can. Hi, Anne-Lieb. Thank you for that question. The consultation is still open, so it closes on the 25th of November, so we're still looking for responses on that. We haven't got a firm date for coming out with the government response from that consultation, but we will do all the analysis. It's quite a broad and complex consultation, and we would normally want to come out with that within about 12 weeks. So that would take us to mid-February, and obviously the timetable beyond that is we will have laying of regs in the middle of the year and then ultimate implementation in June 2023. So that's the sort of timetable that we're working to.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for your interest, Anne-Lieb, and have a good day. Thank you for your attention.
You too, thank you, bye.
Okay, the next question, we're joined on screen by Susan McLaren. And Susan, thank you again for giving your consent to appear on camera this morning and for your interest. Again, could you just state your affiliation and then ask your question? I think you're on mute, Susan.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. Yes, I'm a patient representative on Sling the Mesh. And I just want to know, with regard to medicines and medical devices, and with patient safety being paramount, would you consider a patient recorded outcome measure, as in a PROM, that uses a free text box, which can then be crunched using artificial intelligence?
That's a really interesting question, actually, Susan. I'm glad you've raised it. Alison, can I come back to you?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Susan, for the question. Very interesting. And in fact, patient-reported outcome measures already form an important element of our approach to safety and surveillance, and lots of these measures are already captured within our reporting terminology and hence will be incorporated into our assessment. But you rightly call out actually that important information is often contained within the free text box within the form, which historically has required a manual assessment in order to incorporate that information into our sort of signal assessment or our consideration of the adverse event. And actually we anticipated, for example, through the COVID vaccine scheme, that we'd receive significantly increased numbers of reports through this programme, and therefore we implemented AI processing to assist in the identification of extra information that would be contained within this free text box, and that included description of adverse events. And that meant we could very rapidly collect a large volume of data from the increased numbers of reports that we got through the COVID vaccination programme, and that provided much more reassurance about the safety profile of the vaccines, and also provided a very useful pilot of how successful the use of artificial intelligence and other machine learning and natural language processing could be in interrogating that free text box. And certainly we're looking to include this new methodology following the success of that programme, and we're working with various external partners to explore how we could use this not only within our free text box in the reporting forms, but also in electronic healthcare records. So we're very alive to this possibility, as hopefully, building on the first question, we increase our numbers of adverse reports. How can we interrogate them and understand them in a more robust and comprehensive manner?
I heard a very strong yes there, Susan. So, does that satisfy your question?
It does, yes, thank you. It does very much. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your interest. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. So for the next question, we're joined by Janine Jameson. Hello, Janine. Welcome to the board. Again, I understand you've got a question as well. So if you'd just like to state your affiliation and also then ask your question, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm currently European editor for International Pharmaceutical Quality Journal. I used to be a pharmaceutical assessor at MHRA, and now I'm really fortunate to get to go to international conferences and hear how well regarded MHRA are, particularly in my field of quality and the inspection as well. And how other regulators quite often refer to us. They're certainly very much involved in international regulatory discussions on innovation particularly. So we've heard some wonderful things this morning, and my question is quite often about resources. We've heard a little bit about resources, and particularly in the area of innovation with all the change going on now, I'd really like to hear from the board about what is being done to support and retain the fantastic staff that MHRA have.
Okay, well, that's a really important question, Janine. Thank you for that. Rachel, we also had a similar question from another member of the public who pre-submitted a question. Could you just read that one out? We'll take the two together because I think they're quite closely aligned.
Yes, certainly, thank you. So the pre-submitted question said, with the publicised reduction in the MHRA staffing levels, are the present very welcome regulatory initiatives introduced post-Brexit, such as ILAP, sustainable within reasonable review and assessment timelines?
So I hope you don't mind, Janine, but I thought the two questions were quite aligned. So June, maybe I could come to you and just ask you to respond to those two questions.
Well, thank you, and thanks to Janine and our second questioner, who I think may be Malcolm. We've got a very timely opportunity to discuss these with you today, and I must say it's great to renew contact with colleagues who really do understand the regulatory environment and the opportunities in front of us today. So taking the first one, which Janine is about retention of our highly expert and yet pragmatic reviewers, very much a priority in front of mind all the time, because we can only succeed with the expertise and with retaining and, if necessary, retraining the experts that we have. And so part of our transformation focuses on this, particularly in the area of innovation. You've heard a very vibrant discussion about that this morning. So we're looking to create very satisfying roles in the new structure that enable people really to deploy the skills they've earned and the knowledge they've gained to make these central decisions around benefit and risk, particularly when there are more uncertainties in the area of innovation. So that's the aim. How will we deliver it? We're forging links, as you know, with some of the learned societies, royal colleges and so forth, to see how some of our training initiatives can be supported. Every member of staff has their own personal development plan. So I hope I've stressed how important we see this as a key to success for our organisation. So turning to the second question, which is around sustainability, and again, very much part of our creation of our transformation programme, is to look at a model, which is the life cycle model, which enables a much more joined up approach, a much more efficient approach and streamlined approach, so that those regulatory decisions are made very efficiently. We're looking at our service model at the moment and making sure that we place a priority on services like ILAP, which may well develop as we go forward to a new cultural way of working. Work sharing will be part of that sustainability, and some of the successes of ILAP have been linked very much with our US partners, the Orbis FDA initiative, and our work sharing principles that we use as we interact with Access, Australia, Canada, Singapore and Switzerland. So 2 key elements for the success of our transformation, but Chair, I hope I've given a flavour of our intent to deliver on both those fronts.
Okay, Janine, I hope that sort of answers the question in a broader sense. So I think I'm hearing a sort of a continued investment in skills development, which I think is vital to stay completely up to date with medical technology advances. I'm also sort of thinking about hearing about work sharing, and I think also some of our new regulatory processes will be about being risk proportionate. So it's not necessarily doing all the same things we've always done in the same way. So looking at more agile, more responsive ways of delivering our services. So that I think is some of the things we're looking at. We're really grateful for the question, so thank you very much for that, and hopefully you have a nice day too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So the next question, Rachel, I think is back to you this time.
Yes, thank you. So the next question is about a product called isotretinoin, and the questioner is saying that the isotretinoin expert working group was reconvened over 2 years ago. 31 isotretinoin deaths have been reported via yellow card since 2019, so that's 102 in total. And additionally, 86 deaths have been reported to the FDA in the US in the last 2.5 years. And the questioner is asking whether it is acceptable that so many lives are lost, and whether suicide and loss of sex life are acceptable risks for treating acne. And then there was an additional question contributed in the chat on the same product, which asked whether the reports of deaths in the US had any impact on the expert working group review, and whether the expert working group had made any requests for immediate action to be taken.
Okay, a really important topic here. Alison, can I come back to you, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the question. And of course, our thoughts continue to be with any families who have lost loved ones. So I would like to reassure the questioner that the safety of isotretinoin has been carefully monitored throughout the period of review, during which times the benefits of treatment were considered to continue to outweigh the risks for the majority of patients. Although the 31 reports that the questioner highlights suspected to be associated with isotretinoin have been received during the yellow card scheme since 2019, 30 of these reports actually related to deaths that had occurred before the period of the review. So I think it's important to note that as part of the review,
We've been working hard to raise awareness, and we've been encouraging people to report suspected side effects regardless of when they occurred. So we have received some historic reports for some time ago. But it's really important to reassure the questioner that healthcare professionals were informed of the review. They were reminded again about the risks with isotretinoin, including the need to fully counsel patients on the potential risks and be vigilant for any suspected serious side effects through articles, for example, our drug safety update bulletin in both August and November of 2020. So with regards to just picking up around the timelines of the review, we have done a very thorough assessment of information collected through a variety of resources, including patients and other stakeholders, because this was obviously critical for such an important review. And we've carried out multiple engagement opportunities to try to listen to everyone who's interested in contributing information to the review. And that explains to some extent the time that's taken, because it does take time to bring in all those views and perspectives. And we've held 8 meetings, including 3 meetings where patients and other stakeholders were given opportunities to present their views, which have really added to the material received through the public call for information. And as a result of this very careful and robust consideration of all the data, it's been important to do this, to take the time, including, as I said, listening to patients before reaching a decision on any actions. And recommendations will go through to the Commission of Human Medicines to seek their advice on which actions are needed. So I would like just to pick up a bit on the international deaths picture. And the focus of our review has been on UK spontaneous reports and data, where we have a much more detailed information on the patient history, other prescribing, and other factors which are important for us in the assessment of these events. However, we have been in contact with other regulators, including the FDA, and we get information on worldwide data through reports which are called periodic safety update reports, which are submitted to us annually for this product, and we've been reviewing those as well as, of course, continuing to examine the worldwide literature to get a fuller picture around the risks and benefits of this product. So I hope that provides reassurance to the questioner.
So I think there's an extensive amount of work being done in this area. That's quite clear. In terms of approximate timescales for this report to go to the Commission of Human Medicines, have we got an approximate timing for that?
So it's anticipated that it will go to the Commission of Human Medicines this year.
This year, excellent. Okay, and I think it's actually personally, I think it's really good to hear that we, the international context as well, and using the PSURs as we call them, the periodic safety updates, as part of the process. So we're taking the widest possible view on this. So thank you for the question, and hopefully that provides some assurance on what we're doing. Rachel, there's another question, I believe.
Yes, that's right. So this relates to the recent approval for molnupiravir, which is also known as Lagevrio, and that approval was provided by the Commission on Human Medicines. And the questioner is asking whether the trial data is publicly accessible for independent scientific evaluation.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Laura, can I come to you this time?
Yes, sure. We are aware that there is a lot of public interest in the authorisation of this product, which was a really exciting development. And we normally publish our public assessment reports within 60 days of the decision being made. In this case, we're trying to push that through because of the public interest, so we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks on that one, and that'll be on our website. But we're also aware that the marketing authorisation holder, MSD, are also planning to release the data on the clinical trials and publish those in scientific journals. We haven't got a firm date on that, but we're expecting that to happen as well. So the short answer is essentially yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. The next question, I'm pleased to welcome Paula Goss. Hello, Paula. Thank you for joining us today. You've got an important question to ask us. Can you just state your affiliation and then ask your question, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a patient and an advocate, and I run a group called Rectopexy Mesh Victims and Support, and I'm also a rectopexy and hernia advocate on Mesh UK. My question is, when will rectopexy mesh complications and hernia mesh complications be looked into with regards to the efficacy of the approved medical devices? Because obviously we know vaginal mesh has had the pause, or pelvic organ has, but ours hasn't.
Okay, it's an important question there, actually. Alison, can I come back to you, please?
Yes, and thank you very much, Paula, for the question. And obviously we recognise that some patients really develop serious complication regarding to these surgical procedures. And as you've just already mentioned, the pause on the urogynecological mesh is still in place, and for the majority of procedures. And we're continuing, obviously, to monitor any adverse reports which are submitted, including any evidence from the literature or from an international perspective. As you're aware, there's a number of elements which needed to be in place before the pause could be lifted, which is also relevant to other types of mesh surgical procedures in terms of your question around efficacy of those products. And one of those elements is really key, and that is the ability to understand long-term outcomes from these procedures. And that to enable that, we really need to have a linkage between the surgical procedure and the long-term outcome in an individual patient. And in order to do that, we are developing a UK-wide registry. It's being developed by NHS Digital. It's going to be called the Medical Device Information System, and we're actively engaging with NHS Digital on this product, on this registry. It's absolutely critical to understanding what you're asking, which is the efficacy of this product. And what we need to be able to do is track in real time trends and information around public health outcomes, whether they occur close to the surgical procedure or much further in time, and that's the critical thing. And obviously the current timelines of that are October 2022, 2022, that's right. We are working with NHS Digital, and one of the critical things to feed into this registry will be a registry of all medical device products on the UK market, and we're working very hard on that registry. And currently we have 1.2 million devices registered, and that will feed in to the medical device information system to enable us to, in time, get that linkage. But that will be what will be required to enable us to answer your question. But in the meantime, of course, we're monitoring the safety of that product through our spontaneous reporting systems. And as you've probably heard through other board meetings, we're working hard to upgrade and improve that system to capture as many reports as possible.
Definitely, yes, thank you.
Okay, well that's excellent, Paula. Thank you for raising the question. It's a really important area here, and I think you can sense the important investment that we want to make to address this. I also wondered if it would be helpful maybe just to make a sort of a public offer to meet with you and your patient group to discuss some of these aspects in more detail. Because
that'd be really good.
Because I think that will be really helpful, because we'd really like to understand your perspective, as we develop these systems. And I think if we can maybe arrange offline an opportunity to meet with your group.
Sorry, Alison? Chair, I'd be delighted to do that, Paula.
Yes, that'd be really good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for your question this morning. I really appreciate it. You have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Rachel, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So now we're going to move on to some of the questions that have been submitted in the chat during the meeting. And we'll do as many of those as we can. So the first one is, when can we expect the MHRA to have approved the Novavax vaccine for use in the UK?
Okay. June, could I maybe come to you on that one?
The application is with us, it's been submitted. At the moment, it would be premature to give a time frame.
So, but it's certainly being reviewed. That's the important thing. Received and being reviewed, I think, is the answer to that one. That's as far as we can go at this moment.
Okay, Rachel, next question.
Okay, so the next one relates to the Cumberledge review. How has this impacted on concerns about other drugs and devices outside of sodium valproate, surgical mesh and Primados? Is first do no harm just the name of the report, or is that the goal?
Maybe Alison, I can come to you. We've had a number of board reports now around what we're doing around this. I think it's more than a job title, is how I would, a report title is how I would describe it. But Alison, is there any other context you want to add?
I would just say that the principles that were raised through the Cumberledge review about rigorous and comprehensive capture of safety signals in a timely fashion and listening to patients. So the predominant message is the system didn't know, so how do we ensure the system does know, applies to all medical products, as well as that key principle of embedding more interactions with patients so that we can hear that patient perspective at first hand. And the Safety Connect is the first step in this programme. With, in addition, we've heard today at the MDIS, the Medical Device Information System, and other mechanisms to link and capture more data to give us a fuller, more holistic picture of the benefit risk of all products.
I think that's really helpful, actually, Alison, and certainly my view would be that in this very meeting we've talked around yellow card and promoting the yellow card scheme. We've talked around patient involvement and engagement at different levels of the regulatory process, and they were key components of the Cumberledge review. You know, we've talked about the investment in new technology systems to enable us to monitor the effectiveness and safety of products on the market in real use. Much more effectively than we've ever done before. So for me, this is actually the way we are now working. This is not just a report title. That's how I would sum it up. But thank you for that, Rachel. That's an excellent question. Another one, please.
The next question relates back to the discussion on the balanced scorecard earlier. And it says that NIBS scientists have been pushing for impact tracking and measurements for many years. The work of the agency as a whole has tremendous impact, but there needs to be investment to get the necessary data and firm decision making to support it. So how can this be addressed?
Well, that's interesting. I think there's probably two components there. There's probably actually what should the measures be, which I'll come to Mark, and then maybe how we fund it, and then might come to John. So, Mark, why don't you say what you want, and then we'll give you the challenge of paying for it.
I want many, many things, because what we have here is an extremely diverse organisation. The question raises in NIBS, and now NIBS does multiple diverse functions. And our measure can be something like, for example, in the COVID-19 vaccines, we were being asked to routinely test the quality of RNA vaccines. We had many assays in house chair, but we needed to actually move them from occasional usage to immediate usage within months. Now, the impact of that was success, as has been shown in June's report of all of the number of batches we studied. Now, that is one particular impact measure which the data has been collected, the data has been reported to the board. Another from June's example was the polio work. This is a fantastic success built over many years of work. And so actually the board has seen many reports over the polio work over many years. It's been published in scientific journals, it's been discussed at WHO. We collect all of these. The data is collected traditionally through the scientific divisions, collated by the corporate affairs team, signed off by the senior management team and reported to the board. What I think the question is basically addressing is, well, how do we make it even better? How do we improve it? And there are various software packages out there which might help, but the question is agreeing what the impact measure is and what is the format for getting it. So I will certainly with delight ask John for more funding on various measures, but it is actually knowing what the right stuff is. And so at the moment you tend to get basically context and data reports, and we are very open to improving in that in any way that people want to raise.
I think in reality it's not really a money question, is it, John? It's actually being really clear what it is we're trying to measure and then how we go about collating that information.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Stephen. I guess a couple of observations. First of all,
as we transition from trading fund and become more accustomed to the spending review process, because that's our future, the Treasury in those discussions, Department of Health in those discussions, are always interested in outcome measures rather than outputs. And as we know from our balanced scorecard journey, we are on that journey to deliver those. In terms of the kind of scientific importance, I thoroughly agree. When we started the development of the balanced scorecard, we were working with Mark's illustrious predecessor on the development of a scientific index. The fact that we don't yet have it in the balanced scorecard probably indicates it's not quite as easy as perhaps we thought it might be. So I think the general topic of trying to represent a fuller aspects of NIBS and the scientific work the agency does is absolutely relevant, and we were discussing that earlier in the meeting.
I also wonder whether there's an opportunity here to actually link it with something else we talked about, which was actually the opportunity for more staff engagement. So if the questioner has got some ideas that we could actually take advantage of, maybe actually outside the meeting you could actually make an approach to Mark in the first instance, to actually sort of propose how we might do this. And then Mark, you might want to think about how you actually do some staff engagement events within your scientific community here in the agency to actually sort of start to develop some of these measures, because I don't think it can be done by a group of people in a darkened room. It needs to be probably much deeper into the organisation than that. So maybe as a productive answer to that particular question, maybe we could actually do something like that.
Yeah, agreed.
And maybe also ask our customers.
Yeah.
Because if we get that wider perspective of what is valued from us, that will actually contextualise what we think is valuable. In the end, it's the outcome is going to be felt in the healthcare service, in patients' lives, international partners, etc. So it might be the start of something quite big, actually.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Okay, thank you, Rachel. That was a longer answer than you expected, wasn't it?
It's a very good answer. So a couple more questions. The next one is asking for more information on the patient reference group for ILAP, which was touched upon earlier.
Okay, Mark, can you provide any context on that at all or not?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The patient reference group on ILAP.
I'm afraid I can't provide much more context at the moment. We'll certainly follow up on it. It's something that we're basically developing further. I'd need to get the timetable from the team. Sorry.
Okay, maybe we could take an action there, Rachel, just to go back to that particular questioner with a written response.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Another question?
So the next question is really going back to the discussions about different projects that are in place. And the questioner is saying, are there formal project managers and delivery plans in place for all of the projects that are talked about?
Okay, this is probably not just transformation and not just technology to everything. John, is there a simple answer to that one?
Probably not a simple answer. I mean, the truth is, in the larger transformation or digital related, yes, we do have qualified, experienced project managers leading the development of those. In the smaller ones, perhaps we don't. We do have project management skills, across the agency. It is an area in demand, and we have a relative shortfall. So. Certainly an area we would need to expand on.
But certainly in what you're saying is, I think the big strategic areas, we have professional project management support. Some of the smaller projects, sometimes actually they might be better managed by the teams that actually know the detail better in some situations. But I think obviously you'll keep that under being monitored, I guess, in terms of the requirements.
Yeah, and actually there are a number of our senior staff and actually so the Government Infrastructure Programme Authority has a number of development schemes. Some of our senior people have attended the flagship scheme, the MPLA, and the slightly more curtailed junior version. So there has been a number of development across the piece.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay, Rachel. Probably getting towards the last question, I suspect.
Yes, absolutely. So the final question for today is about machine learning, and the question is, how does the MHRA plan to regulate machine learning algorithms used to inform clinical decision making that are designed to change over time in response to new inputs?
Okay, what a great question. Okay, Laura, could I ask you to answer that one, please?
Yes, and it is a great question because it surfaces one of the key challenges of this area of regulation. And the answer to how we plan to regulate it, the answer to that is we're still working that through. But I can tell you about some of the work that's going on in this area, and we are working with partners in the UK, such as NHSX, and we're also working internationally. So we heard earlier in the CEO's report about the publication of the machine learning good practice principles in October for medical device development, and that was a joint effort with Health Canada as well as with the FDA. And within those principles, it also recognises the importance of monitoring of good performance, because as the question highlights, these models are actually designed to change, and they don't always change in a linear way. So having thorough monitoring so that we know when the changes is happening as they're evolving is really, really important. So we have an AI and software as a medical device change program, the details of which are on our website. And within that, we have 2 linked pieces of work. One of them, the broader work package, which we are referring to our ship of thesis work package. So the idea of how many boards in a ship do you replace before it's a new ship. And that is really to look at the unique opportunities that adaptive devices present for patients. So that's a really broad piece of work looking at that. And linked to that, we've also won a grant from the Regulators Pioneer Fund to look at metrics for monitoring performance. So just quickly, our consultation is still open until the 25th. So if the questioner wants to put the responses into particularly chapter 10 of that consultation, we'd be really pleased to see those responses, or indeed any other aspects of the consultation. So thank you for the question.
That's great. That's a very comprehensive answer, actually. So thank you, Laura. Rachel, I know we said that there was one question we'll need to have a written response. Were there some other chat questions which we'll also need to handle in writing?
Yeah, there are a couple of other questions in the chat which we can pick up outside and provide responses in writing. Okay, well, thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody who's asked questions today. I think we really appreciate that, and we really appreciate the dialogue. Also, thank you to everyone today who's been watching the board meeting. I'd like to say a particular thanks to all the staff in the agency, not only for the incredible work that they do, but for the contribution to the production of these papers, and also thanks to colleagues in communications and the Governance Office for their support in today's meeting. I've got to say, just finally, I'm really proud to work for the MHRA. The work that we do is vitally important. The purpose is clearly to protect and to improve patient health. And we're going to do that by continuing to enable scientific innovation. We want to accelerate patient access to new products, and we want to strengthen patient safety and surveillance at every opportunity that we can. So with that in mind, I'd like to close today's meeting. Thank you for your attention and have a good day. Goodbye.